Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Well, hello friends. Welcome back. Welcome back. Is everybody enjoying this late summer weather here in Copenhagen? Talking to strangers about it? Today we have the poet, translator, and artist extraordinaire, Morten Søndergaard, on the show. And we had a great sit down on a beautiful deck on a sunny day at the Louisiana Museum here in Denmark. We were looking out over the water, listening to the waves, watching people swim, and we talked about words, art, and life. It was glorious. He is a poet/artist who is relentlessly searching for new paths in his work and isn't really held down by format along the way. If you don't know his work, then you're in for a real treat. He's word-based in his practice, but in reality, so much more. He is constantly trying to move words from the page and out into the world. It's fascinating stuff, really. So you can look forward to that. In other news, life is certainly galloping along, no? There's a couple of shows I want to recommend seeing this week. The main one being No Joke by former guests of the show, Asger Carlson and Roger Ballon, the South African artist. The show is actually called No Joke. And if I know either of them as well as I think I do, then it's going to be a delightfully fucked up world that they bring to you. That's at our friends V1 Gallery this week, opening on Friday. There's also a new gallery which has recently opened called Copenhagen Outsider Art Gallery, which I think is a really interesting addition to the landscape here. Their first show has already opened, but be sure to go and check that out. I think it's definitely something different. I'm looking forward to getting to know what they do a little better in the future. We'll obviously have links to both of those on the show notes for this episode. The final bit of business is that if you still want to hear more of my yapping, you just can't get enough. And more specifically, if you want to hear me speak my circus Danish, as they call it, then check out a talk for the Copenhagen Photo Festival, which I moderated. That was this summer, which is about photography and the art market. There will also be links up for that, so check it out if you like. And ever onwards. I'll leave it up to Morten to say the rest. Please enjoy our talk. But wait, so you don't speak Italian regularly?
I do speak Italian, I would say every day, but it's not my first language. I like this being in language, you can say.
A lot of switching back and forth.
Exactly, and especially you get aware of the cracks. All the things that are in between, and sometimes I forget what language I'm speaking, which is a wonderful feeling.
Do you find that there's certain things that are much easier to say in certain languages?
I've been living in Italy for 8 years with my family, and I noticed that we often used words from Italian in the Danish language because it just worked better. And the kids often switched to Italian when they were fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I swear in Italian. I find that Italian is the best language so far for swearing.
And I think that's why they use Italian for opera.
And the gestures and ma vaffanculo, like that whole
it is a really it is a language that is it's an opera language, and that's why they use it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of a good place to start because I feel like so much of what you do and what language is about is this in-between thing.
Sure.
Finding these strange little alleyways between the main roads of language, of thought, of ideas, of communication, etc., etc. And that, that's the beautiful thing about living partially in Denmark, living partially in Italy, about speaking 3 or 4 different languages. That whole thing is because you do find these sort of little pockets that are separated and
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, that's also the way I view it, and I'm kind of looking for those cracks and those in between areas where language doesn't really fit, you can say. Or I think actually every language is good enough for whatever you need.
Right, and you start somewhere.
Yeah. But I mean, you can write poetry in all languages. You can. It's not that language in itself has limits, but there is a nice. It's actually the question about translation. You can say when you move things from one language to another, you get aware of what language does to you.
Right, and there's a weird thing about literal translations when you start saying, oh, well, what's a good example? I don't know. I like to make fun of Danish because English is my first language, but they have these things. Like one of the ones I really like is they say held og lykke when they actually just mean held. Good luck and happiness, I guess, or does it succeed? So I'm thinking like, okay, so hey, do you know where 7-Eleven is? Yeah, it's over there. Good luck and lifelong happiness. It just strikes me as such a weird, even though that's not really what it means. That's what in my mind when I translate it to English, that's what it means. And those things kind of continually come up as you explore new languages.
Sure. And when you are in another language than your own, you can say, you constantly bump into language. I mean, language is there as physically. That's
right. That's absolutely right. We just had a visit from Italy, and I spoke Italian for 3 or 4 days, and it's hard. It feels like you're having physical interactions.
Exactly.
Like I'm tired afterwards.
Yeah. And this tiredness is interesting, I think. And you see. When you translate, the text actually somehow becomes naked in between the two languages, and it's interesting to see what does not fit in the new language, in the target language.
Right, and when you try to mash one language into another, and it just doesn't go in the hole you want it to go into.
Exactly.
There's a way to say it, but it's not the way you're trying.
And that's a wonderful thing, I think. It's the best problem we have.
Yeah. So what was it like before you spoke other languages, when you just spoke Danish? Were you thinking of language in the same way?
I think I always had a problem with language in the way that I am not the best spelling person in the world. And when I grew up going to school, it was always this language was there as a almost physically barrier. I have an image I like that, when you want to say something, even in a poem, it can be like you are a bee, flying against the window, and you keep on trying to say what you want, and you just hit this transparent barrier, and suddenly somebody might open the window and you just go, and
without knowing it.
Without knowing it. And I like to think about language as something, as a window. You bump into it, and then sometimes you can only see the window itself, but then you can see what's beyond it. And as a kid, I was always having this trouble of saying things. But I think that is actually also why I became a poet, because this little weird error in my brain makes me constantly think of other ways to reach the target. So I have to constantly go other ways around.
That's funny, because usually you'd think that having trouble in school with language, I'm also a terrible speller, would be something which would keep you away from writing or keep you away from, I don't know, being interested in words and language.
I guess for some people it is like that, but I think in your case, it's something that it becomes very physically, and you are constantly immersed in language, or you feel, outside of language. And when I write a good poem, which only had happened 1 or 2 times in my life, I really feel, okay, now I am in the world. I'm finally in the world. There's a correspondent between me and the world. And then that's why I'm keep trying. It's a way to gain access to the world for me.
Magic is hard. It's hard to make magical spells. And,
yeah. In a way, it is magic, and I think poetry has a root in magic, in the way of trying to enchant, and like the shaman, trying to gain access to the world. Right,
unlock something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have the potential to write well, but for whatever reason, I don't want to fight with it, And it seems like your attitude would be a good way to look at. How do I say it? It's like any problem in life. If you can either tackle it as an insider or an outsider in a way. So if you look at it as an outsider, then there's a special toolbox you have, which a lot of people don't have. And so when people usually avoid problems, maybe it's better just to look at it as you're coming around the other side.
Sure. I mean, the detour is very interesting, and to arrive straight is not so interesting. So I like to take, the long way home, instead of going straight to the target. And I think that's also what we do in poetry. We kind of make a detour in language, because if it was about what is the point in the poem, it's not really that. It's like in music, you can't really say what is music about, or what is the meaning of music, but you can definitely, you have to go back and listen to it, or you have to read the poem again in order to get the point.
Right, and the act of doing it explains the presence of it in a way.
Sure.
No one has to say, why does music exist? What do we do music for? Nobody gives a fuck. That's not the point.
Exactly.
But what did you? I mean, were you interested in this from the beginning? Did you grow up thinking I'm going to grow up and be a poet? Or
I mean, somehow I always wanted to write, because it was like the thing that was in front of me, but I would say my first experience with kind of framing the world was through photography. So I very early I was having a camera, and I was making photos, and I think this framing, especially one day I remember, going out in the snow fields and take photos of trees. You can suddenly you can leave the rest of the world out, and it was just very interesting. And that was this kind of way of looking at the world that was suddenly very interesting to me. And then, I mean, I kept writing, and it just, I never thought of myself of doing other things than writing, or pursuing this look, you can say, this frame.
What was the reality of that situation? Because I know that Denmark is very much, it's very much set up in paths. So you're like, I like working on things. Well, you're going to go to technical school.
Yeah.
And I am into studying, so you're going to go to gymnasium. And so it's actually not very clear. Like, the art path is a very, very thin, small line.
It is.
And it's really, I learned that when I came here. I was like, I'm going to go to art school. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. This is not at all what I thought it would be. And so I imagine there's a lot of people where it's hard to fit into that little one bike lane going down through the forest that's called the arts in Denmark.
It's a very interesting question. Talking about bikes, I think I had the feeling, of being on a bike that was too big, and it has this wobbly wheels, and it didn't have air in the tires. And then but I just, I wanted to go there, so I just kept, biking. Exactly. And somehow I managed to go far enough that I couldn't do anything else. Like I was just on that.
Fuck it, this is what I do now.
This is what I do.
Yeah.
And then, but there's still some area missing.
Yeah.
But I think, it just was. I never looked to the sides. But I think also this. Yeah, in the school I was often, outside of the school class instead of inside, and I would spend my time in doing other things, detouring somehow.
Did you grow up around Copenhagen? Or?
No, I'm born in Copenhagen, but I spent my time in the middle island of Denmark, Fyn,
yeah.
and Odense, which is a horrible place. And then I moved back to Copenhagen, and from there.
Well, I'll tell you, as someone from outside of Denmark, I think Odense is all right. I wouldn't want to live there, but I don't hate it.
No. I mean, growing up is not
right.
We can talk about that another time.
But there is here something which is a pretty tremendous resource, which is the Writers' School.
Sure.
And that is a small educational line, but it's very important, we could say. Yeah. As far as I understand, it's considered the thing to do. If you're going to be a writer, you go to the Writers' School. And if you don't get in, I don't know, you work at a cafe. That's what that's the choices you have. But did you go there?
Yeah, I did go there, and I went to the university looking for other people that wrote poems, and I didn't find anybody there.
Here in Copenhagen? In
Copenhagen, yeah. And then this writing school was, at that time, it was pretty new. And I was lucky to get in right away. And at that time, the founder of the school was a really charismatic poet, and it was a totally change of life for me. You were accepted as a poet from the day one, and you had to, of course, to prove your way. But
do like, what years are we in approximately?
This was 25 years ago for me.
Okay.
So it's in
early 90s, late 80s.
90 in the 1990, and but it was fantastic time for me, and I certainly got a lot of friends who wrote poems. I was looking for it milieu, and I found it.
I mean, the first time I went to an art school, I think I was high for like a week. Just that feeling of being there for the first time. Everybody's there for the same reason. Instead of being the weird fuck-off kids in the corner, you are all of a sudden with a bunch of people who are doing, and after a while it simmers down. You realize everybody's the same old asshole everywhere you go. But that feeling at first, and that's the importance. It speaks to the importance of having some sort of milieu, like you say, some sort of group that you can bounce off of.
Exactly, and I think it was actually a pretty hard tone. You could really get destroyed. And then afterwards, it was a piece of cake getting reviews in the newspaper, because the tone was really, really hard. But I found it extremely interesting, also because it was not about writing. It was more about reading. So it was actually a reading school. So you get to read your own text in a new way, and I was exposed to literature I didn't know the existence of, and
that's actually really important.
Yeah. So I think the reading and the doors that were open to me. In literature and in art in general was just what I needed at that time. And
it's really good to get smacked around a bit too.
Exactly, like being in a pinball machine.
Yeah, because you're not always going to be good, and you need someone to tell you when you're not good, so you can go ahead and try to be good. Or at least develop what's good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but did you find then that going to that school kind of solidified your space, you in Denmark as a writer? Was that, because it's kind of like here, there's the whole, art education once you're done with that, you're kind of accepted as an artist. You are at least in the...
Yeah, the rules, the school still plays a lot of... it has a lot of... it plays an important role. But I think it was more difficult at that time. Now it's... Well, I don't know. I mean, I was lucky I could publish just after the school, but it's not given in any way.
Right.
But now there's many writing schools also in Denmark. You have a lot of schools and people go there.
Private ones and smaller ones.
And højskoler.
Yeah.
But I think... It's also, it was so nice to stop there, you know.
That's absolutely
it
true.
was so nice to get out of there, you know. You had feeling that people were with their fingers in your brain, and you just wanted to be a little on your own,
I think education should work like that. I think when you start, it should be the most exciting thing you've ever done, and when you leave, it should also be the most exciting thing you've ever done.
That was the way it was for me.
Yeah. So what happens, afterwards?
Then I started to publish, and I was lucky to publish for a long time there, and we did many things, and also we kind of founded a little. I don't know, a literary school or something for a moment, which was called Øverste Kirurgiske, means upper surgery, where it was like an anarchist movement in Danish literature for a year or two.
Was it a school or was it a group?
It was a group.
Okay, yeah.
We had a magazine and we also did this encyclopedia, not in that group but in another group, you can say, which was an encyclopedia with the idea of putting the words that doesn't come into normal encyclopedias or poetical definitions of, for instance, the word yes or no, and all the things that doesn't go into normal encyclopedias.
Again, those alleyways.
Yes, exactly, the cracks.
Roads.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it became a huge success in Denmark. So it unfolded slowly and nicely for me, but I think I'm always been a little slow in things.
Me too.
Yeah, and it's nice actually because then the expectations is not on you, and
right.
And I like that things are taking its time.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the tremendous thing about maybe having some sort of system in place. Some sort of support system, so you can write something and then decide it needs to be thrown away and start over.
And this has to be said. We're so spoiled in Denmark about the support system. I live in Denmark, and when I was in Denmark, we just took it for granted. But when I moved to Italy, when you told them about the Arts Council, they looked at you and say, "What?
Right? That's not real, right?
No, the states give you money."
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't understand it, and it's
it might be the world's best.
Yeah, I think so. And we're very spoiled in that way, and all over Scandinavia this system works. Until now, there are, of course, many people who wants to change it, but it's part of the social democracy idea that art should be supported, and art is important to have as part of the welfare state.
Right, part of the cultural life of a country.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the problem with somewhat of a Americanization of of politics and ideas and liberalization and such. And I don't know the answer either way.
No, it's something we have to talk about it a lot. I think it's something that should be debated every day, because it's not a given thing. And art should also, prove it's
right. There needs to be push on both directions.
Exactly. So many. I think many Danish artists are too spoiled. they just. It's just the joke is that if you have two artists meeting up, the first thing they will talk about is how can we get support, you know?
Right.
And I think sometimes,
it's not completely false.
No,
that joke.
No.
Unfortunately, and it's weird. It is weird because coming from America, there's also zero support there. Yeah. But it's a very dynamic situation. There's a lot of really great stuff being done, but it is literally sink or swim, and if you can't somehow become financially viable, you may just spend your whole life working all the time and barely being able to do what you love.
I mean, to give an example, I just got this lifetime grant, which is an incredible thing for me.
Congratulations.
And for every Danish artist, and there exists this possibility that there are 250 grants that you are having payment every month.
Right, you're basically secured financially.
Yeah, it's not a full monthly salary, but it's maybe a half month,
right.
And then you don't have to prove anything. You they just give it to you, and it's until you're fucking die,
Right.
And it's amazing because...
But it only happens to people who have literally worked 30 years on something and been an absolutely integral part of the cultural life of the country. It doesn't happen to 22-year-olds.
No, but you can apply for it. It's
right.
impossible to apply, and somebody has to die in order for you to get...
Oh, there's only a limited number of spots.
There's 250 people, and...
Do they tell you whose you got?
Yes, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's like a vampire thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's just to tell you how things can be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the system, it needs to be constantly checked.
Sure.
But it works.
Yeah.
In its foundation, it works.
Yeah.
And again, you just go to any other country and tell them what the opportunities are, and they lose their shit.
Yeah.
But what happened? You eventually moved to Italy.
I mean, it was part of a linguistic experiment, you can say. It's almost 20 years ago, and our idea, we had a common idea to move and out of our language.
You and your wife,
to see what effect will it have. My former wife is also a writer. So what will happen to our language moving out? And there was let's go for half a year, and we stayed 8 years eventually, but. And I would say it was really interesting. I knew Spanish. I was translating Borges, and my Spanish was quite good. Then I'm in Italy, and I couldn't speak the language. And this silence was really interesting. and you felt like, you are again enabled to speak.
Right, that physical barrier.
Yeah, and it was this like putting yourself again in this almost being a baby, learning to speak. And it's a situation I really like, and it's a fascinating threshold. This what happened just there in this, when you're starting to say something, and what's just these small sounds just before meaning comes. All these, all these attempts to say something.
Right.
And this is where I like to be.
Right.
Mainly.
So was that the experiment? Is that what you found out?
I think that was part of it, and the first two books I wrote there was about that, you can say.
And you were still writing in Danish at the time.
Yeah, and I'm writing in Danish. I like to do sound works also, and those are often, about this wanting to say something. And also in my more experimental work, it has been around this saying, or this trying to say something. For instance, I did a piece where I took my DNA as part of my DNA, and wrote with the words I could find in that DNA sequence, and this noise, the junk DNA, and so on, and also this work about the suture line, which is the line we have in the skull. The one,
is it the one that goes like this?
Yeah, it's like going,
going
going on our skull. We have this line, and it looks like a graph or a writing somehow, but it doesn't mean anything. But it has clearly a meaning, since each of our writings are individual. So I'm looking for those, or even asymmic writings in the body and around us.
Well, that's the thing I kind of really notice about your work, is that although you are clearly a poet and a writer, you are constantly trying to pull language out of its traditional place and put it into, from the fine art world, I'm going to say sculptures, but also sound, video, performance, and just recontextualizing words, language, rhetoric, philosophy of language, all that sort of stuff. And as a visual artist, I find that very interesting. This constant interplay between physicality of something which is decidedly not physical, although you argue it is.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, my word pharmacy is a way to make words really, physically.
Right, and that's what I first saw and what drew my attention to your work.
Yeah, so, but yet language is not physically, so that could be like, as you said, is in a way the core of my my work, trying to debate that, and maybe because of this, initial struggle with language.
Right, that it feels maybe more physical, the blocks.
Yes. I mean the boxes and but doing the metaphor with the bike again. I mean, if you're on the bike, it could be language as a bike. You, as long as it just goes, you don't think about the bike. It's just working. But as soon as you hit a stone and the air gets out, then the bike becomes really physical to you.
Right.
It becomes something. It becomes an object, and I think that's my situation.
Right.
Often, and with the word pharmacy, it was also a very personal work, because in my childhood there was a lot of pills, and my father he works with language. He's teaching Danish, and I really thought that pronouns was the same as Prozac. I just thought it was a medication, and so when I wanted to do my word pharmacy, it was such a natural thing. But I see people react to it as something. I don't know. Maybe it clears up things for them.
Well, it helps kind of like structuralize. It also depends on whether you're a visual person or not. Because I'm very much a visually based, like learning. I do my best learning, like seeing.
Yeah.
And it does help. Like I'm terrible at grammar, so in a weird way, it's really nice just to be like, substantives. Check it out. That's what that looks like. That box is that color.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I found it so tremendous, because making the invisible visible is almost always good.
Yes, and I mean the words. I mean, there's nothing in the box. I thought a lot about, should I put M&Ms or anything in there, but that would go against the idea of language, I would say. So what's in the box is just the leaflet that explain about how to use the word, what is the side effect of pronouns, and
it looks like one of the ones you get in a box of medicine. The
Exactly,
typography
yeah.
is the same.
Yeah. And
The
the
type of
paper,
paper is
yeah.
the same. That whole thing, it looks exactly like one of those uber long.
Exactly. That you
medicinal-
never read.
Right, and you get a headache just looking at
Yes,
it.
and you get all the side effects.
Yeah.
and so it's about, if you're pregnant, can you use adjectives and where to store them and so on.
Right.
So actually, I got many gifts from this simple operation of crossing two languages, the language of medicine and the language of grammar. And when I started to work on my word pharmacy, I didn't know, I was not a good in grammar at all, So it was a teaching process for me as well.
Did you get better at grammar?
Of course I did.
Wow.
I mean, I now I know what is an article,
I gotta get me one of those.
I didn't know that when I started on that. And being a poet, you are often, you're often expected to know these things, but I'm not. Of course not. I'm just using language.
Right, because words function differently for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not an expert in grammar at all.
Do you do any teaching?
No, not really, and I'm not so good at teaching, I would say. And if I say yes to a teaching class, I just look at the watch all the time. But I like to talk to people like we do now, and I think that's the best way, and that's how I learn a lot about art, was talking to other artists. And I've been lucky, especially in Italy, to be around artists and had many nice talks there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something that kind of seems to come up again and again at the moment. I've been getting emails from an artist in Seattle who is very frustrated about the way things are and, his work and, the art scene in Seattle and stuff. And I just kind of told him, I'm no better off than you are, first of all.
Yeah.
And maybe it looks like something, but whatever it is, it's not.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
But also that, like, you just gotta you gotta do it yourself. And if you go and you talk to people and you find people and don't sit in your studio all day long. Go out, talk to people, discuss ideas, build something. If no one will show your work, get a closet to show your work in. Even Hans Ulrich Ulbricht, the most famous curator in the world, his first show was in his kitchen. And that just came from him talking to artists. And his first show was in his kitchen, but it had Christian Boltanski as one of the artists, one of the most famous artists in the world, arguably. So the point is really like to create. You have to create that world, because your work will not necessarily carry itself.
Sure.
As good as it is, it's probably it needs something else to help carry it, some sort of wave to ride, something. And and that's interesting about moving. You moved to Italy. Did you feel like I was a step backwards in terms of that world? I
mean, well, being a poet, you don't. You don't sell anyway. You don't. There's nothing you lose anyway. Right. But I must say I was lucky to bump into a lot of people in Italy, and they were all sculpture people, so they were working with materials, and I was very envious of their kitchen of things. The tools. They needed a truck to move the things. I could press send on an email file, and then it would be on my editor's desk.
Right.
But they needed heavy tools, heavy trucks, heavy things. And then I started to say, okay, maybe I could do the same. Maybe I could take a piece of marble and put it on on the kitchen table and say, see you in the square in 5 minutes.
Right.
Love, Morten.
Right.
And so that's how it all started with this writing in marble. So doing shopping lists and all sorts of things.
Right, somewhat banal things, but in marble.
Yeah, and it has to do again with the material, so and velocity. So if you print something on a very thin paper in a very tiny writing, then it becomes something.
Right.
Like a medical leaflet, or if you print if you print something or sculpt something in marble, then it bears another meaning. So it's about playing with who's saying this,
right? And what's the context?
What is the context? What is the material? What kind of meaning does the material carries with it? And
well, that's very sculptural.
Yeah,
that's the kind of things that sculptors are negotiating constantly.
Sure.
What do I make this out of, and what does that mean for the idea behind it? And in that sense, language is exactly the same.
Yeah.
What is the vehicle which carries the idea?
Exactly.
What does that do?
Yeah.
In terms of the expression?
And this is something I really, really find fascinating. That meaning also comes from the material. Of course, if you print a poem on a piece of paper, but if you do, other things to it. Right now,
the difference between a book and a printout.
There's
a big difference right there.
It's huge difference.
Same text.
Sure. And right now, I'm working on a big floor with writing, and I also did a huge wall in Copenhagen with writing on and with light, and so suddenly the dimensions, the materials, they do something to the words, and I just find it's so interesting, and in a way it sometimes I think it's even more interesting than paper, but I think the books will always be the backbone in my work.
The books or the words?
The words.
Yeah.
The words.
Right. That would be my guess too. I mean, that's the thing about poetry, is that it's one of those things that nobody really knows what to do with.
It's like a sculpture.
Right.
Nobody knows where to put it.
Right, but at least there's a gallery, right? You have a gallery, and then there's some sort of
roundabout
understanding about, like, you make this, someone might show it to the public, someone might even buy it, But poetry, it's like, well, we'll put it in a bookstore where there's, Lonely Planet travel books too. It doesn't necessarily have its own space.
Well, until now, in major bookstores, there is always a section of poetry, and I like to think about this section in all the bookstores in the world as a path. You can really go there, and that's where I go in the bookstore.
Right. Well, that's where the quality of a bookstore makes a huge difference too.
Sure.
Whether it's a chain, huge store, which obviously doesn't sell that many poetry books, versus.
But often they're there.
Right.
I mean, they're there.
Italy has great bookstores.
Yeah, they have fantastic bookstores. They have a good book culture still.
Yeah. But it's very much in Italian. It's harder to find.
Yeah, and they translate a lot. So because they are very bad in English, so they have to translate.
They're getting better. They're getting better, but yeah.
But it's actually in this case a big advantage.
Right, because you have more access then.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, again, I'm so fixated on the sculptural elements of this, and that kind of, it's what I keep coming back to as a visual person. But do you feel like you're just getting started with this sort of exploration, or?
Sure. Yeah, that's really the feeling I have, and that's also maybe why I find it so interesting right now to go, out of the books. But I think I always had that feeling, whenever I stayed in my work, that I'm just starting and I'm just learning, and I'm just came into the room.
Because it'd really be fucked up otherwise, in a weird way. If you got so used to it to the point, I'm just talking about practice in general as an artist, if it wasn't sort of bewildering the whole time, it would be... it may not be fun anymore. For whatever reason, it may not work anymore. Yeah.
At least that's how I feel, and I think that's also why I keep going in new directions in order to do something that I don't know,
right?
And I can get wiser, or can get learn. That's what I want. But but I keep, writing poetry just for myself, or for that's kind of the backbone. But this new field I'm discovering, it's very interesting, and I also have a gallerist suddenly,
right?
Which
you
is
are
crazy.
A visual artist now, in a way.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
and looking into this whole art scene is also quite bizarre because new rules work there, and I feel privileged because I don't have to I don't have to go by their rules. So
That's nice.
Yeah.
But again, small alleyways. It's all about finding those holes, those cracks in the system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you are. I would be tempted to call you a visual artist.
Well, a lot of things I do now is visual based. Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it.
No.
Words are the foundation.
Sure. I'm word based.
Right.
Like people are based on do oil painting, or I'm based on words.
That's your material.
Yeah.
And do you think that is very much affected by the fact that you hung out with a lot of sculptors and visual artists?
I think I keep going back to this threshold I was talking about before, where you start to say something. This moment of articulation, this moment of coming into form, or coming into something that you can see.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Coming from the invisible to the visible. And that's where I like to be. And I like to come from that side, not the other way around.
Well, the nice thing is that both of those things can affect each other. So the making of physical works can affect the way you write. And that will
That's true. Yeah.
That will, eventually at some point, that'll probably make some sort of, I don't want to call it a switch, but it'll start, you'll start probably going back more into books and written.
That's what I see now, that it's actually going the other way from the visual things are flowing back.
Right.
And that's very interesting. By the way, do you know any good word-based artist who will be a person working with words that you like and you find interesting?
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind is Lawrence Weiner.
Yes, that's also...
I cannot claim I love his work, though. I think it was a little bit before my time, and it's a little too esoteric, just speaking objectively about it. There is a fair amount of photography that uses words.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
I really like the way Dwayne Michaels handwrites. He's a photographer, and he makes stories. He makes often, maybe 5 photos in a row that tell a narrative, and then he would handwrite on the photos underneath.
Okay.
You've actually probably seen them.
I saw him in San Francisco, actually. Yeah.
He's definitely an older gentleman now, but he has very touching, beautiful photography, which is very
touching,
poetic.
actually. Yeah, it's just
So that's probably somewhere that I would go. I'm trying to remember his name. There's a San Francisco artist named Daniel, either Gutierrez or Guerrero or something like that, who has a book called Things You Can See When You Have a Hand Grenade.
Okay.
Which I very much enjoyed, and that was very word-based. He he proposed this huge sculpture which would go over 3rd Street in San Francisco, which was where the MoMA is, the Museum of Modern Art, which used to be a very poor neighborhood. And he proposed this huge neon sign which would go over like 4 lanes of traffic, which said, "This is a nice neighborhood."
Oh, wow. Nice.
Of course they weren't having it. The city said no. But that kind of use of words I really like.
Beautiful.
And I think a lot about using words in my own work, but it's tough.
I mean, you also have many artists, like painters that write things, which can be often banal, silencio. And,
right. Or even on Kawara's date paintings.
They're actually also very interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes words just function as a kind of add-on, but for me it's more important that it is the core. And
there's a lot of bad art with words too.
Exactly, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. That you just throw them in as something. You can. Then it gets deep.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a terrible story. When I went to art school, we had to take foundation. So it was 2D, 3D, 4D, all that sort of stuff. I had to take painting classes, even though I knew I was interested in photography. So my first painting in my first painting class was an abstract, terrible color thing where I wrote 1-800-DIVORCE in the front.
Yeah. You see.
And I was smart enough to know it was bad, but I wasn't smart enough to make anything better. And I remember the teacher, just the look on his face where he had to be like, well, this isn't completely invalid, but this is pretty awful. And that's the thing. I think words often are misused in that sense because for you, you're doing research with words, whereas other people are like, well, I can't say it otherwise, so I'll just go ahead and write it.
Exactly, and then it becomes banal often.
Yeah. But I don't think that's a problem for you because you're coming at it from it's physical from the beginning.
Yeah, and I deeply believe that words they count. They are important. They are the most important somehow. So I hope I don't just throw them around. I mean, it's words mean something.
Do you hang out with other writers?
I do, and I have many friends that are writers, and it's a very important dialogue and I like to speak with other writers.
Do you guys do you show work to other people before it's done?
I do. Yes, I do.
And that helps
I have
the process?
readers that is the first readers of my work. And it's very, very important. And then with the years, you of course also know how to react to what they say because what happened.
Right, you want them to be honest, but maybe sometimes it hurts.
Yes, and that's very difficult, but it is very important.
It's absolutely important. And one of my problems with writing is that I'm really bad at editing.
Yeah.
But what
but
is
you're
editing?
never wrong when you throw anything. When you throw things away, just throw away.
Right.
You're never wrong.
See, I'm bad at that.
Sorry?
See, I'm bad at that. I need to be better at throwing stuff away.
Yeah, you just throw away. And if you can't throw away, that's might be because there's something you want to keep, and then Hemingway said the best thing is a good shit detector and a bad childhood.
And booze, lots of booze.
Yes.
Well, what is the process of editing for you? Are you laboring over things for a long time, or are you just throwing away until it's right?
Well, I rewrite a lot. I take a new sheet and if I'm handwriting, or I try to rewrite on the computer. So that's kind of editing because if you don't want to rewrite bad things, so that's a very good way to edit. So and do it 10 times. You can really edit that way. Translation is also very interesting because if you translate something and you can't really translate it, then there might be a problem also.
Right.
And
God knows translating Borges must be hard.
Well, actually, I would say he's not easy, of course, but he's such a good writer that the words are so precise.
That's right.
That and especially in his late works, it's like math. You can just translate. But of course, then there's a lot of slang, and his gaucho work. Then you have a lunfardo, which is a special, gaucho dialect and stuff. But on the other hand, he is possible.
Right.
I have been translating things that were more difficult, actually.
From Spanish or what?
From Italian and Spanish. But to edit, I think to have a good. What do you call it? Skraldespand?
Trash can.
Trash can is the best tool you can get.
I'm definitely going to learn from that because that is one of my major problems is I get really attached to things.
Yeah.
And, the thing about throwing stuff away is you don't have to be attached to it.
It's wonderful to throw things away.
Well, you just take the part that's good. You don't have to throw away the good part.
No, exactly.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And that's the thing because there's a lot of stuff that maybe didn't really need to be there anyways.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And that's the same for photography because if you go out and you shoot, let's just say, 500 pictures, the way you edit that together is going to make a world of difference for what that project is. And it's got to be the same with words. You have to shoot off a lot of stuff to find out what it is that's important.
Sure. I agree.
Now, what about just to wrap it up here, what about the public part of it, the reading, the interaction with, because that's a poetic tradition, which is not so much in the visual arts world, where you stand in front of people and you present your works.
And that's a very interesting situation because then it's also a moment where you feel, is it really good enough or can it stand this moment?
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying, but I love it. I mean, I really like to read public. I rehearse a lot before and I prepare myself.
By yourself?
Yeah, I do. And also tonight I practice for that. But being in Italy, I have less access to that situation. And it's something I miss, you can say.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's actually also part of the editing, you can say, that I'm reading aloud for myself. And it's often you don't want to read aloud something that is not good. So it
hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. And if you're reading a book, I mean, any book, if something is really good, you can hear yourself read it aloud. And that's because you like it. And so that's also a way to know your text is to read it aloud and do it.
To chew on it.
Chew on it, yeah. To hear it.
It makes a lot of sense. I think, I've read poems aloud a couple of times when I was a teenager, and it kind of hurts if I think about it still. And that's because I didn't really, for whatever reason, I didn't like what I did. What I had done, I had not edited whatsoever. It was just one shot. All right, let's try this, And that's how you learn. That's a good way to learn. But there's an American comedian who has a saying, which I really relate to, and he talks about standing on on the stage and eating your balls.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's it's very visceral.
Yeah.
And I twice have stood on a stage and ate my balls.
Yeah.
And it's it's not something you forget very soon.
Yeah, you're naked and you are exposed.
Yeah.
And it's also a chance because it's the text really becomes clear and so that's why I also read them a lot before I publish. So,
right. Part of the workshopping.
Yeah. And often you change you change the text because you can hear it. So
that's where friends are, or at least even enemies. Having people who are there to take part in the process of hammering it out.
Yeah.
That can be really important because you do need to eat your balls.
Yeah.
Sometimes
you need to eat your balls. Yeah.
So
that's part of being an artist, I think.
Yeah. Does it still happen? Do you still stand on stage and sometimes it just goes really terribly?
I do a lot of improvisation with music and words, and sometimes that's the thing I love the most, and it is also the most frustrating because sometimes it's really you feel okay this time. I had to eat my balls.
Wasn't right. Yeah.
But that's also why improvisation is so interesting because you can really get somewhere you didn't know you could go, and that's in the moment. So with that, I like it so much, but that's sometimes the worst moments because you can really fall from a very high distance. But that's also wonderful.
It goes back to where we started, really, with the idea that there's a physicality to work, and that you have to fly into that window in order sometimes to see
you have to keep trying to go. Yeah. Suddenly somebody will open it, and you will fly into this nice field of flowers, and it's rewarding.
Yeah, but you'll always fly back anyways.
Somebody will close the window. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're about out of time here, aren't we? Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation.
Appreciated.
It was nice. Yeah.
And good luck tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by Twin Musicom. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our poetry reading of a website, undergang.net. That is the portal to everything. We have Twitter. We have Facebook. You can find us. You can holler at us. You can tell us what you think. If you do like the show, we would appreciate it if you'd take the time to leave a review on iTunes. It makes it so much easier for new listeners to find us. This show is produced in part with the kind support of the Danish Arts Council. Thank you for joining us.